Hello everybody, Ben Woodruff here with another Falconry video. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about names and avian psychology when it comes to being called and the way they process things. Now don't dismiss this subject right away. It's actually going to be a deeper topic than I think we normally discuss in falconry. But I think it's one that's actually very interesting to bring up. So first of all, names, just in general. A name, we as humans are symbol-minded. We attach meaning and symbols together. We go to the level of not only having sounds mean things like, that could mean remote control, but we've agreed as a species in the English language that this means remote control. Okay, but remote control, those are just random sounds that might as well be goo blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter. We agree together that those sounds indicate this object. We also have an additional layer when it comes to written language where we have characters that symbolize the sounds. And that's why it's usually easier as humans for us to listen to an audiobook than to read. Not for everybody, everybody's different of course, but usually that's easier because you're going through one level of symbolism. These sounds represent these nouns and verbs. If you read it, then it's these symbols represent these sound symbols that represents these nouns and verbs. Okay, so when we're talking about when we're talking about names, we recognize faces, we recognize people separately. There's people at your work, you probably don't remember their names, even though you've introduced each other a few times, but you're like, oh, that's so-and-so. You recognize them. But a name is special, right? A name symbolizes an acknowledgement of mutual agreement upon what they are. So I come up to you, I say, hello, my name is Ben, which it's not really my name. It's what you're really saying is, hello, people call me Ben. It has been agreed upon by me and those I interact with that this is symbolized by the sounds Ben. And then you might be like, cool, there's a lot of Bens. I'm like, oh, and I'm a Ben from the Woodruffs. So I'm Ben Woodruff, right? So that's what we do, these levels of understanding when we get to know each other. Mutually agreed upon sounds to mean a name that we associate with what we see. And what we remember, what we experience, but especially what we see. You see this face, hello, I'm Ben Woodruff for another Falconry video. You're like, hey, I remember that guy. That's the name attached. That's what we do as humans, okay? It has meaning, it has purpose for us, it helps. And then when we do it in writing, of course, then we know who to send the bills to, who to send the taxes to. But that's a very human thing. But attaching meaning through vision is not just not only a human thing. But I want to start off by saying that as far as we know, names, verbal sounds being associated for a name, as far as we know, is strictly a human experience on the planet. Now, other animals most certainly recognize individuals, and birds are one of the groups that have been tested at length. Particularly, a lot of scientific studies have been done on colonial nesting birds, geese, penguins, seagulls, where you're on a little island and there's 10 trillion of you. How do you recognize your mate and your own young? The studies have noticed that looking at each other face to face, facial recognition is huge for birds. They recognize each other largely as individuals by front head-on face and subtle differences and nuances. Now, maybe to us, that's hard for us to see. A penguin's a penguin, but they definitely see that, and scientists have studied this and shown it to be the case. We know that birds can recognize us as individuals as well. We tried this one time in my younger days with one of my Harris hawks. I had a goatee at the time instead of a beard, and my falconry apprentice looked fairly similar to me. He had a goatee as well, and at the time we had a fairly similar build, and this was a very loyal Harris hawk that, and we had known each other for years, and I let her fly up to a thing, and I had him and I stand side by side. We both held up identical gloves. His had meat. Mine was an ungarnished glove, and she looked, she was confused, and she still flew down to me. Now, that's not normally how falconry works, right? There is a positive reinforcement reward system, is how we train these birds. But still, it was an interesting thing to note. I work extensively with parrots and hornbills and could go off with a lot of stories as well as how they will learn words or learn certain things of association that are symbols. But if you wonder about a bird's ability to understand symbols, remember, a symbol is just something that represents something else. So recognizing patterns is a form of understanding symbols. But let me give you one of my simplest examples. A lure is, there's all different kinds of lures, but let's say you have a leather bird, a fake leather bird. Doesn't look very real, and you tie meat onto it, okay? Swing it around to retrieve your bird. I train my birds very quickly that once they've come to the lure for food for a few times, I stop putting food on it. I swing an ungarnished lure, the bird catches it, and then they know after that I will put food to the side and they'll hop off and get it. So they come to learn really quickly the association with food, but they know, hey, if I do this one behavior, food will appear. So I'm not catching food or an object with food. I'm catching an object that will bring, and then if I do that, I understand that then food is going to appear. So it's adding an extra step in there. I do that so that they're less likely to be aggressive over the lure, and so that there's no chance of them accidentally raking the lure and taking the food and flying off with it. That's not a language, but it is a level, a type of symbolism, a pattern of understanding that shows what birds recognize. And that comes into the naming thing. If you want to name your bird, go ahead. I usually do. My normal thing is, some people get their bird and like, I've always loved this name and I want to name my bird this. Something from a book or a movie, whatever. You have fun with it. I get it. And I usually kind of wait for the personality of my bird to come out a little bit. Are they fun-loving? Are they really aggressive? Are they, a spaz, whatever? And I let that personality sort of determine. But on the one hand, I got two directions here. On the one hand, you could be like, we are only naming for ourselves. Our bird does recognize us. They most certainly recognize us. But as far as we know, they have nothing akin to a name for us. There's just recognition, and that's it, okay? And under mutual understanding, you've built trust. You've built, okay, if I call you to my fist, food's going to appear. If you fly overhead, I'm going to flush up prey for you to catch. There's understanding, but it's done without words. So as far as we know, our birds never would have a name for us, and that concept would be foreign. So if you name your bird, it's for you. Just fine. But there's this other side that is not just for you, and that's the psychology I want to get into, and that is not as a name, but as a signal. My birds, here's my general rule, and this is what I tell to my apprentices as well. Name your bird whatever you want. I've had birds that I never even named that I flew for a couple seasons, and it's fine, whatever. Name them or don't. But my recommendation is to give them a name that's 1 or 2 syllables if you can. No more than 3. You could name them Makabakaboku, Snookamuka, whatever. But the bird has a mind that is simple and built to react and respond. It's different than us. Raptors are smart. They are intelligent, but they're not. Most of them are not creative thinkers like us or even like a parrot. It's more about a quick stimulus response. Something happens, they see something, they hear something, they feel something like hunger, and they see a tree move, they see a quick motion, and they are forced to react, to respond. They have to respond. Well, do I respond by laying low? Do I fly away? Do I attack? What do I do? And this really permeates the way we train our birds, is understanding this, that every time you give a new stimulus, that they have to choose some sort of response. That response may be to do nothing, but it's still a choice. I'm going to just sit here. Here's food. I'm just going to sit here. Here's food. I'm just going to sit here. Now, remember, earlier I gave the example of the lure, the ungarnished lure, where after a few training sessions with food on the lure, I remove the food. And I train them, hey, here comes the lure, boom, okay. And they're like, okay, I grab the lure, and then on the ground next to me, he gives food. They understand this to this to this to this, right? Same thing happens when you're calling a bird. We will whistle or make a call, right? My whistle is all, holding up a glove or something, and I say, and that is something that sounds a little bit maybe like some of the hunger cries of some of the baby birds that'll make them pay attention. Like, wait, what? What is that? Is that a food sound? Is that the sound of siblings? What is that? And then they see, oh, okay, so it's designed to get attention. You've seen in some of my other videos, holding up a glove, tapping, holding up the meat, and whistling. These are all things designed to do it. Now, if you just sit here with meat on a glove, there's only so long that they only really have to respond once. They're like, I'm not that interested. But if you put it up again, boom, they have to respond. Put it up again, they have to respond. If you do that every 10 seconds, you're asking the question again and again. You're presenting that, hey, you need to respond. You need to make a choice on this. Same thing with lures. Same thing with whistles. And the same thing with the name. If you have a name that's 1 or 2 syllables, that is simple enough. They don't view it as a name, but they most certainly will. You learn to associate that with you directing some sort of behavior, usually calling them to you, but it might just be like, hey, eyes on the game. So my Harris hawk absolutely knows her name, Maddie. And I got her as a second-year bird, and the guy who had first had her named her Matilda, called her Maddie for short. I wanted to do a different name, but she was so wise, she knew her name, and if I said Maddie, she instantly, and it wasn't necessarily like a human that she understood that was her name, but it was almost like saying, Maddie. It was like eyes on the game, whether that means, hey, Maddie, okay, I got your attention now. Fly over to me, fly over to the truck, there's a rabbit, go get it, whatever it may be. She most absolutely knew what that name meant. Depending on what bird you're flying and your flight style, this is more or less useful, but the principle is the same no matter what. And at the end of the day, our birds don't have a mind exactly like us, but it's still amazing to think because, again, I'm not really Ben. Those are arbitrary sounds that we all agreed upon to, okay, this is what we will refer to this individual as. So if somebody across the road yells, Ben, huh? And it's the same thing with my birds. Maddie, they look, oh, yeah, what do you want? And I do not believe that it is to the level that our birds understand that refers to them specifically. That I am Maddie the Harris hawk. I don't believe that. It's possible, but I don't believe it. But they absolutely can learn those 1, 2, or sometimes 3 syllable names enough that it is a very specific and very personal call to them. Even hooded. And you can see it with other things. Anybody who's done falconry long enough, if you have a little Ziploc baggie, you have food in it. If you're pulling it out and they hear that rustle and they're hooded, they know the rustle of a plastic bag probably means food. So even most hooded birds hearing the rustle of a plastic bag are like, huh? Wait, I hear, something's going on, right? Same thing with the whistle, same thing with the call. And so that's how I approach names. I like to have names that are short, that are 2 syllables, and then if I'm yelling that's an additional call that is much more specific than just a whistle. Unique sounds that are short enough that their mind and few enough syllables that their brain can process it as a, hey, you, yeah, you, specifically you, eyes on the game. Remember, from their perspective, they are not your bird. You are something they are experiencing in their life. They've never heard of falconry. They don't know if you have other birds. They don't know visually what's happening if they're hooded or being transported to a field. They just know, hey, I'm at home. Whoom, now I'm wearing a hood or in a travel box. Whoom, now I can see again, and suddenly I'm magically in this endless sagebrush sea with jackrabbits, and whoom, I'm just walking on your fist. You're looking over here, Maddie. Whoom, go get you. They key in. So the psychology is there for them to make that connection. And just remember it from their perspective. So enjoy naming a bird whatever you want to name it, and enjoy it in the human way. But just also remember that whatever you choose is also a call that is specific to them, that they will learn the more you use it. And I, again, in all my training, when I'm calling them to the fist, calling them to the lure, I do use my bird's name, and they do respond to it as a part of the call that is specific to them and helps keep their head in the game. So, some interesting thoughts on the psychology and naming of birds. I hope you enjoy it and give you something to think about. Let me know down below what you've named your birds over the years. It's funny to watch. The longer falconers practice falconry, the goofier the names they get. So many first names are like destiny. This is my red-tailed hawk destiny. I can't tell you how many destinies I've known over the year. And then later on, they're naming birds like pucker butt and goofball and ugly face, and it's like, oh, okay. But so it's always fun to see. Let me know what your thoughts are on naming birds and what some of the names of your birds have been over the years. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Really helps me. I'm trying to get this channel built up and get this information out there. And as always, happy hawking.